defined earlier innovation as a risky social process. And so one of the core activities in managing innovation is really to put the risk out of the process. And this is being achieved in many companies by a so-called stagegate process. What's the idea? First, let's start with the so-called innovation funnel, another famous concept from the old days of innovation management. And the idea here is that really your innovation activities should be like a funnel, starting very broadly, evaluating sets of ideas broadly, finalizing a concept, and then precisely executing it and launching it into the market. So along this funnel, we start really with the activities we talked about earlier: idea generation, concept development, realization, and launch. So along these funnels, we start with ideas which we transfer into innovative concepts, which after realization are the invention, which think about our earlier definition, when successfully placed in the market, we really have an innovation in form of products, services, or processes. Or in some instances, we find that we really don't have an external market for our product, so we sell the innovation the invention in form of knowledge by out-licensing or similar activities. Along this picture, at the beginning, we have a stage what we call the so-called front end of innovation. The front end are the first activities. And the front end is also sometimes called a fuzzy front end. It's here we have many sources of uncertainty. We really search broadly. And some of these sources of uncertainty are beyond our company border, some are within our company. So here an idea at the begin is really to start to search broadly and reduce the uncertainty, but really don't reduce it too much, as then we would perhaps search too narrow and be not innovative enough. While we then proceed over this innovation funnel and along the process, however, we want to strongly reduce the innovation risk and just execute what we really are certain about. As also the more we move to the right on this picture, the more expensive it gets. Idea generation actually is pretty cheap. Also market research is pretty cheap compared to realization or then the ramp up of a production process. So the idea is the more we move to the right, the more we proceed along the stages of the innovation process, the less risk we would like to have. I give you a few numbers on this. This is a typical innovation funnel from a consumer good company. And they said, in general, in the last year, we started with 1919 ideas, which we described and explored. Out of these, we, for about 25% of these original ideas, we created a small project to really follow up on the idea, perhaps develop a concept. Out of these projects, we generated 369 so-called board projects presented to our top management for decision on further execution. In the end, we launched 167 new products. This number already indicates most of these products probably were incremental innovation. And now it gets interesting. Despite all that screening and the selection and the board decisions, out of these 167 problems, 124 were flops. They did not find any market demand. 24 of these products were successful, but actually not profitable. 17 were doing okay, but just 11 out of 167, and in the end, out of 1919, only 11 were really successful products that really had a much higher average return. What does this mean? This first means that really innovation needs a system that is able to finance all the risk and all the trial and error solving taking place. These 11 products in the end have to finance all the rest and the wrong attempts. We also could now say, well, perhaps we should really reduce the trend with all these flops, so we really should screen stronger at a much earlier time. But perhaps this is also not correct, as then again we would look too narrow and perhaps then in the end up with no successful product at all. But because of these numbers, which are really typical for many companies, the main idea and the core requirement for a successful innovation project is, just think about, is really a process that helps us to de-risk the innovation process over the different stages. The more expensive it gets, but that at the same time give us some room for creativity and exploratory thinking. And perhaps one of the largest success factors in managing innovation is really addressing this point. And it comes from Robert Cooper, a consultant and management professor who defines the so-called stagegate process. And Cooper probably is, from a practitioner perspective, one of the most important persons in managing innovation. What is his basic idea? He says, let's structure an innovation process in a set of activities of different stages. A stage is defined as a set of activities we execute in this stage. And the stages are divided by so-called gates. A gate is a decision point that allows us to make a decision should we proceed to the next stage. So often it looks like this. This is the original illustration of the stagegate process. So Cooper says, and you see it's similar to our 3-point differentiation I had earlier. He says it starts with the discovery stage, idea generation. Then I have to pass the first gate. And these ideas that pass the first gates, they come into stage 1, what he calls scoping. We would call it concept developing. Then some of the concepts pass into stage 2, where do mainly economic activities of building a business case, really doing an investment plan, calculating is there a market for it, can we earn money. If this is successful, the process will proceed across gate 3. Enter development. Actually looks like a small stage here, but it's often a very long activity with a lot of sub-stages of developing the product. Then we have a functional prototype, which we go into testing and validation. So both technical testing with regard to legal requirements and quality and so on, but also market validation by concept testing and market testing. Is there really a market? If this is positively ticked, we pass gate 5 and go into the launch activities. And after we launch, Cooper reminds us, we also should do a post-launch review to really on the long term learn from this process and see did we pick the right products and projects. So the idea on the one hand side is that each company should have these kind of structures, processes, and in each, let's go one step back, in each of the stages, a clearly defined set of activities, methods, tools you execute in this stage. Then let's now look again a little bit more into the gates, as these are really responsible for the de-risking, to putting the uncertainty out. The gates you have to think about as a meeting. This is a meeting where people from the management and the project team come together and they talk about their achievements and they evaluate the project process. And so it's a kind of a quality control, but it's mainly a go or kill decision point. Sounds very hard, but it really is. As at a gate, the decision is made, should we proceed with this project and go into the next stage? Should we invest into it more? Or perhaps it's better to terminate the project at this point as it's not meeting the gate criteria. So gating criteria here at the beginning is something that we talk about idea screening. Really mainly looking in the fit to market, does it meet customer requirements, but also does it meet the strategic priorities of our company. The second screen is more or less the same, but in a more elaborated form. Then we build a business case, and so the idea of the screening of stage gate is really very financial. We see, can we earn money with it? But we also at this time have already a better understanding on the solution information we will need and the technical concept behind. So in this gate we also talk about, do we really trust us that we technically can achieve this outcome? The development stage then is finished by gate 4, when it's about really, should we invest now in testing? Often not such a good, not such a strict gate, but it's mainly also to revise at this point. Here is this what we defined here, what we achieved. Are the open problems we identified in gate 1 and 2, are those really met by the product? If we tick this, we go to stage 4, and really here the criteria then at the gate 5 are, does it meet our minimum validation criteria, does it meet all the quality tests, and so on. Then we go into launch, and then it's too late if something is wrong, as then at this stage we are out in the market. And so the idea is really, and this was one of the main achievements of Cooper, that he says we should really make this systematic. And for all the innovation projects in our companies, we should have more or less the same criteria. So it's not that someone who has a great idea and is a good promoter and talker has a higher likelihood as someone who also has a great idea, but it's a little bit more nerdy, someone who is not so prolific, and that both ideas have the same chance, and the projects are equally competing on budget and scarce resources in their execution stage. So the main activity really here, to summarize this, that in each stage you have a set of activities, you do mainly to gather information, you do some analysis, and you create clear deliverables, clear outcomes, a concept, an idea description, an early prototype, a functional prototype, a really ready to launch product, which are then evaluated in the gate decision by a different set of people, normally management members, that do this go-kill decision point. And so this is why it became a core successful for innovation. It's really this continuous need to evaluate and make a decision, and this stage gate process is forcing a team to really make these evaluations at all points and not just run into a contingency and say, oh, we totally are sure that the customer wants it, and then spends a lot of time by going through the entire process without having these in-between evaluations. And also clear gate criteria allow us to compare projects and provide management with an aggregated overview of our project portfolio. Where are projects, in which stage of it, how much are we forward, when do we expect a next market launch? However, while this idea has been very appealing and I think it's very intuitive, also the stage gate process has been subject to plenty of critique. Some companies found that it's too determined, it's too slow just for minor improvements. It adds a lot of administrative burden. Some say it's not suited for radical innovation, as what would be the gate criteria. Some say because of these clear gate criteria, some really radical projects are not passing the gate criteria, which are set based on the experience with old products. Also, it really is a very sequential thinking. We do this activity, we pass a gate, we go to the next. However, we know from innovation it's often a trial and error process. It happens in many iterations. We should be allowed to go back, as only in a later stage we really get suddenly new information about the customers. So perhaps we go back to concept generation, and the original stage gate process rather was sequential. Once we pass this activity, we just execute the next one. Also, it's not so much a critique, but more a question of focus. What really happens before gate 1? As obviously the entire process is only as good as what we feed into this process. And while in many companies strong emphasis has been placed on executing these gates and these stages and passing the gates, actually we now know that probably we should have something like a gate 0 or even a gate -1 of all the front-end activities to creating opportunities at the first place. And this is why many companies nowadays use what is called a third generation stage gate process, which is a little bit more flexible, which has more overlapping phases, more fuzzy gates to allow for different contingencies of an innovation project. And this is also what Cooper lately introduced. So he says now in a modern next generation stage gate, we have the traditional full stage gate process for normal projects. We have a so-called light process for minor improvements projects, just variants where we have not much uncertainty. So we just can execute it, have one or two decision gates, and that's it. And then a so-called stage gate express. This is a process for projects with a medium degree of innovativeness that somehow are important for the market and therefore has to be a little bit faster. So also here you see, you really have to consider the contingencies of an innovation process, what you want to achieve to set up perhaps a different kind of project, how to manage it. So we nowadays know that executing a stage gate process with clear activities and performance measures is often really one of the main success factors. But sadly, it's often regarded as sufficient for successful innovation, and I would say it's not. It's just the beginning. It sometimes even is a reason for failure. And so stay tuned, as this is what I talk about in the next module.